This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. It is August 3rd, 2022. I cannot believe it. Hold on. I'm still dealing with learning how to Zoom and record and PowerPoint and, you can see my crazy house. I have bar stools on the furniture because if you have dogs, you know what I mean. So I'm going to move this guy. It's driving me nuts. Anyway, in fact, one of them is barking right now. So we may have some dog interruptions and I do apologize for that. Anyhow, so welcome to, and again, oops, you know how fidgety I am. So again, welcome to my very second Layne lesson. For lack of a better term, I still can't figure out what I want to call it. I'm doing these video lessons because I want to share my work with people. However, I know sometimes it can be kind of laborious to read somebody's research and like, I don't know, maybe, and maybe more interesting to kind of hear me explain things. It also kind of helps me solidify the ideas in my head better so that I can explain them better. I'm kind of training myself to be able to present my work. I want to submit my work to some journals and conferences, academic conferences and journals. So I need kind of practice on how to let it all out and explain it and further those ideas in my head. And my dog, Jordan! I wonder if it's just better to bring him in. Anyway, so I'm doing these videos so I can break down my work for not only for myself, like I said, so I can help practice, presenting, but also to engage you guys, my friends, my family, followers, whomever is interested in what I'm doing with my life and and with Layne Staley. And also, eventually I would like to be a professor and I'm going to apply for my PhD in about a year and a half. And so, if I can, have a portfolio saying, hey, I can profess art, maybe I can get a job one day. Who knows? We'll see. But anyway, so without all of that, so I have written in the last year of my art history graduate degree, I've written 2 significant pieces on Layne Staley. I write a lot of different things about him, but they're usually kind of minor, maybe 2 or 3 pages in a discussion post for my class. But, I've written 2 significant papers. One was entitled Self-Portrait by Layne Staley, the Portrait of Generation Grunge through Iconology and Structuralism. And then I've also written for my classical Greek aesthetic class, classical Greek art class, the Hero Unplugged, the Greek influence aesthetic, lyric and performance of Layne Staley. I think that's the title. Anyhow, so we are only in these videos right now, we're only focusing on the self-portrait paper. I talked last time in the first video about generations and how each generation has its own symbols, its own icons, its own experiences and ideologies and stuff like that. And so today we're going to kind of cruise through and review a little bit of that. That way, you can kind of get back into the swing of it. This is the second time I've recorded this lesson. The first lesson was so awesome, but then the stupid PowerPoint didn't work. And so now here I am. I think I have this all set up. I have like a Zoom post-it on how to do this. So fingers crossed this works. But without further ado, I feel like there was one more thing I wanted to talk about with self-portrait. I guess not. We'll just go through it. Okay, so let's go through that PowerPoint that I shared last week, and we'll just kind of cruise through it and review it. Let's see. Hopefully this works out for my life. All right, here we go. So I don't think you can see me when the PowerPoint is up. See, I'm watching my little preview tab. Anyway, so oops, this is not where I wanted to go. Sorry, guys. Here we go. Like I said, this is the title of the paper, Self-Portrait by Layne Staley. And I am, well, we'll just kind of get through it. Here is Layne Staley's self-portrait, as you can see. And today we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about this self-portrait. But let's review last week. We talked about generational aesthetics and ideologies. We talked about, the greatest generation, the silent generation, the baby boomers, and then of course the focus of my work is Gen X. We talked about a term I coined, Generation Grunge. I introduced Layne Staley, and we briefly chatted about self-portrait. So that's kind of what we dealt with last week. These are the generations we talked about, going from bottom up. Greatest generation, the baby boomers, the silent generation. We talked about, the icons that represented them, like the greatest generation. We talked about, what was it called? Rosie the Riveter and the sailor kissing the nurse after World War II. We talked about the silent generation. We talked about your 1950s status quo, traditional conservative households, that type of thing. We talked about the baby boomers and how there was some radical change. Let me see if I can go back. I just wish I could figure this thing out. Like, come on, hold on. There's a little thing here. What did this do? What does this do? Whatever. At this point, you're going to see me on and off. It's going to be fine. Anyhow, I think it's because I'm sharing the window. Whatever. So we talked about all of the, the different generations and kind of what they symbolized, and like the baby boomers, right? There was a lot of social, political, cultural change, right? There was war, there were assassinations, there were, changes in women's rights and, the fight for that and civil rights. And so a bunch of stuff was happening, right? And so they kind of started to think about getting away from those traditional roles. And so the baby boomer parents, their children were Gen X, right? Let's go back to my PowerPoint. Their children were Generation X, right? And so we experienced times of prosperity, and our war was Desert Storm. We had MTV. There was, again, further social and cultural changes with Gen X, right? Parents were divorcing. We were being raised by single mothers, or the nuclear family had changed, or both parents were working. And so now Gen X would come home alone, for the first time in probably any generation, right? And so we were left to our own devices. We were independent. We could rely on ourselves, and we could take care of the house, and, home alone, right? Even though it was an unintentional Kevin being left at home, he still, as a Gen X kid, could rely on himself to get himself through that whole experience, right? So Gen X was a little bit different. Our parents were, they had endured, social change, and they had endured radical music and radical fashion and, different things. And they were starting to tell their kids, hey, you can do something better than what I did. You can do something better than what grandma and grandpa did, right? You can follow your own dreams. You can do this, you can do that. Like, the world is your oyster, right? I was amazing, except that Gen X had no idea how to get that done, right? It was like, okay, but nobody's ever done this. And now we're all angsty and confused, because it's like, we can do all these things, but because nobody knows how to guide us, they're still trying to push us into the ways that, they want us to get away from. The irony. And so, we're trying to, we're getting mature, we're maturing through the late 80s, the very early 90s, we're going from adolescence to early adulthood and adulthood. We're confused. We're trying to find our own way. We're trying to be the individuals that we were told that we have known that we have been, because we've been on our own, taking care of ourselves after school for years, right? So there was a lot of confusion there. Let's go back to my little PowerPoint here. I will one day figure out how to see me and the PowerPoint at the same time, but alas, whatever. So we had a lot of conflict and a lot of, we're starting to have addiction issues and identity crises and stuff like that was never really shown before in previous generations. So now, within each generation, there may be little subcultures, right? I want to say like your silent generation, you had your jazz and blues subcultures, and, each of them have different things. Well, for Gen X, right, we started to kind of individualize a lot more, right? I remember all through school, I grew up in Texas. So, you had your jocks, which everybody did. You had your kickers, which were your country people. You had your academics. You had your artsy fartsy types. You had your skaters. That was usually my crowd, right? Like the out of the scene, watching, observing, but kind of doing our own thing, right? So everybody kind of identified somewhere differently. And so it started to come to a head, no pun intended, adolescence, acne, come to a head. Puns, sorry. It started to come to a head, during the late 80s, right? Like the music our parents listened to, the oldies, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Skinner, all those guys, we grew up listening to them, but they didn't really kind of identify what we were doing or what we were feeling, right? Then you had your glam rock bands of the 80s and all the pop of the 80s. Yeah, that was great, but it didn't really say much, right? The words didn't really say much. It was more about carnal pleasures and excess and, screaming against the system. Well, that kind of started. We started to scream against the system instead of, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's like, what about us? What about me as the person? Like, let's start applying those lyrics and those things, those feelings of unease and, that we're starting to feel as maturing adolescents and adults, right? So music and lyric started to kind of percolate in Seattle. There's another pun. Percolate, Seattle, coffee. Music and lyric and performance really, and fashion and ideology started to really percolate in Seattle, right? In the 80s, mid 80s through the 90s, right? Seattle grunge started to kind of be a thing, and it really wasn't grunge. It was rock and roll, but it was a little bit of blues. There was some jazz, there was some funk, there was some punk. There was a bunch of different things, and it got labeled as grunge, but you couldn't really identify it because each band originating from Seattle during that time frame had its own kick, its own flavor, its own purpose, right? You had Green River, you had Skin Yard, you had Tad, you had who else? Who else have we got? The Gits. You have everybody. And then you start getting Soundgarden. And then coming out of Aberdeen and Olympia, you get Nirvana. And then before all of that, in betwixt all of that, in the late 80s, 87, 88, a little band called Sleaze. And then there was another one called Diamond Lie that eventually turned into Alice in Chains, right? You also had Mother Love Bone. You had all of these bands that had their own thing. They were emanating and presenting their own individuality. They didn't match with Motley Crue or Poison or Cinderella or any of those guys. They had their own thing, and then they didn't even match with each other, right? Yeah, you had some flannel, you had some Doc Martens, sure, right? I mean, you're in the Pacific Northwest, it's cold and rainy. I live in the Pacific Northwest. That's what I still wear. It's 2022, right? So, but everybody had their own thing. Like Soundgarden had Chris Cornell and that 8-octave voice, right? That power. Nirvana had Kurt Cobain, right? There's way too many things to be said about Kurt. He challenged what music should sound like. He challenged, the irony of lyric. Then you had Pearl Jam that came from Mother Love Bone, but Mother Love Bone was a completely different band than Pearl Jam, right? Just you're only sharing the two members, Stone and Jeff, right? But everybody had their own thing, so things got different. And then you have Alice in Chains, right? And so now there's questions about who we are and what we want and what we're doing, and temptations and our good, our bad, right? We start to think about the philosophy of who we are. And all of those bands, all of those musicians throw that in your face. Who are you? What are you doing? Why did you make that choice? I made that choice. I take ownership for that choice. I want to be better, but I'm still trying to figure out what. And now Gen X is like, and is starting to like see that. And so then you get this generation grunge subculture. And it's like, hey, that makes some sense to me. That sounds like how I'm feeling. Like I feel alone. I feel like an outcast. I feel like I keep messing up. I feel like I want to do this, but I don't know how. Like, hey, this guy is starting to sound like how I feel and is putting my feelings that I don't really know how to go through, right? Like I went through therapy as a high school kid in the 90s, right? Because I didn't know how to identify what I was feeling. My parents were struggling with me, and the therapist, they didn't really understand how to guide me out of that. The only thing that did was lyric. Guess what? It's still the only thing, although therapy is pretty awesome now. Anyhow, I digress. But, like, so I'm listening to this stuff in the early 90s, and I'm like, yeah, this is how I feel. This is what's going on. And it's starting to define me, right? We're starting to get defined by these things. So now, Generation Grunge. So we talked about all of that, right? Then we talked about Layne Staley. If you're here, you already know who Layne Staley is. If you're not, and you're not familiar with him, I am not going to spend some more time speaking about him. You do need to look him up. I will spend another class, delving into him and all his specifics and his actual lyric and, all those things at a later date, but this is not the time. We are talking about how generations and all of the context around them gets represented in art, in lyric, in music, in performance, right? So that's where we're going with this. So now let's go back to Layne. Let's go back to my lane. Our lane. Let's go back in the lane and talk about this paper, right? So generations, get defined by the music and the politics, and it all works together and it coalesces together, right? Everything's that all of those things get symbolized and represented visually, auditorily, to define that generation. My argument in this paper is that Layne's self-portrait is one of those symbols, one of those icons that defines Generation Grunge, which is a subculture of Generation X. Got it? All right, let's move on. So now, I forgot what the purpose of this video is now that I did that long review. The purpose of this video is in art history. We are going to talk about art history is a very complicated subject, right? It involves knowing the politics, the social institutions, the culture, the language, the global aspects of everything, of what's going on in that time, right? And so art reflects that. It is one piece to that puzzle, and it helps represent all of that. So today I'm going to teach you how to look at art, right? What it means to look at art. We're not going to really talk a whole lot about Layne today. We kind of are, but I want you to kind of learn a little bit. Like you're here to learn from me, right? I get to do all the work and then I get to teach you, which is awesome. So you're going to learn from me how to start looking at art and applying it everywhere. So that's today's point. Okay. So hello, Layne. We love you. All right, so today we're going to learn about visual analysis. Yay, I'm super stoked about this. So here's Layne's self-portrait again, so you could see it in your brain, right? And you can start thinking about it a little bit. What is visual analysis? Oh my gosh, do you not love this image? Ferris Bueller, wait a minute, okay, Ferris Bueller. Raise your hand if you've seen it. Okay, so what is visual analysis? Visual analysis is a method of understanding art that focuses on artworks, visual elements such as color, line, texture, and scale. In its strictest definition, it is a description and explanation of visual structure for its own sake, right? So what does that mean? Visual analysis is it's the very basic view, the very first view that you have of a work, right? You look at it, you kind of explore it. You're like, okay, so let's do this. All right. I have this wonderful example, and we're going to kind of apply this to art. So visual analysis, right? Color, it's just the basic foundations of things, right? This is my little wine, coffee, drink mug thing. It is about 10, 12-ish ounces. It's kind of rounded. It's got a dent because I dropped it. It's got some red markings on it, say MT, and there's a state of Montana, and then it says Montana Love. It's got a plastic lid that I can take off. All right. That's the visual analysis, right? That's the first thing. All right, let's finish that definition. Yet the purpose of visual analysis can also recognize the choices that an artist made in creating the artwork, as well as to better understand how the formal properties of an artwork communicate ideas, content, meaning. Visual analysis is often used as a starting point for art historical writing. This is not my definition. The next couple of slides reference the Johnson Museum at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. I've left a PDF link on the bottom of that because that's where I got the work, the information about visual analysis. So I'm just going to cite that there. So visual analysis is basically you look at something, you see what it is, and then you kind of break down how it applies to the things around it, right? And then it comes out, and then you start to plug in what you see, how it applies into your own interpretation of it. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like a 3-step process. So I chose this cup in my demonstration today because it is a really cool example of a visual analysis. So we're going to do this, and we're going to do Layne. It's going to be a lot of fun. Here we go. All right, next slide. Hello, why visual analysis? I love all of my Gen X images. They make me laugh, and I hope you guys do too. So here we go. Why visual analysis? Why would we do this much work to look at a piece of art when we can just look at it and move on? Well, let me tell you why. Visual analysis is not just for art. It is also a critical part of visual literacy, a skill that helps people read and critically interpret images, whether in a museum, on social media, in entertainment, advertising, or news. As citizens of the 21st century, we are constantly confronted with visual media. Practicing visual analysis sharpens critical judgment skills and helps people seek out answers instead of passively receiving information. This is especially important when exposing hidden ideologies that may motivate seemingly neutral images. We're on social media all day long, right? Like we see it, the news is always on, you know, even if you're not watching the news, there's always something on social media you're looking through, right? I have this friend, she's awesome. Her name is Marissa. Shout out Marissa Bowles. She has the most amazing eye when it comes to photos of Layne Staley. Oh my gosh, she absolutely beats me out. And I'm sure there's a few of my other friends who do too, but I've just interacted with her about it. She has such an amazing visual analytical eye. She probably doesn't even know that. She can spot images of Layne that are not even his, right? That somebody has implemented somebody else's hair, somebody's facial hair, somebody's whatever, and made it kind of look like Layne, but not. It is incredible. Even I get fooled. That's really bad to admit, but it is what it is. Hold on. She has an amazing, she's such a visual analysis, and it's awesome. It's awesome because she can critically define what is real and what's not. How many of you can say that, right? We see things all the time. Are they real? Who knows? And most of the time, a lot of people believe them as true. But when you start applying visual analysis, you can start to kind of see through the holes in that. You can start to see the problem areas, the fake news, right? You can start to educate and make yourself more literate visually literate. Right? So that's the purpose of what we're doing in this class today. I'm teaching you guys how to be visually aware of what's going on. Yes? All right. So that's what happens, and that's the purpose of visual analysis. Moving on. What are the 3 keys here? Well, I kind of already told you those, right? You look at it, you analyze it, and then you interpret it, right? What does that mean? How do we do those 3 things? That sounds so easy. Observe, interpret, analyze. We're going to get through those 3 things. And after this class, you're going to learn, you're going to know how to be a visual analyst, right? Just like me. All right, cool. Let's do the first one, observe. Oh my God, do you not love this? It's fabulous, isn't it? Indiana Jones. Tell me what's up with Indiana Jones. I love that. I keep telling my boyfriend that we need to endure a Indiana Jones marathon, but it's summertime and I don't really feel like being inside watching TV. Okay, so let's talk about observation here. First of all, you've got line, you have style, color, space, scale, texture. What does all of that mean, right? So let's come back to this. Line, right? It's got about a curve. The scale is size. It's this big, right? I can do this with it. I can carry it with me. The color is silver. The texture is very soft. It's very smooth. It's very metallic. What are the other ones here? I forgot. Color, scale, space, right? Inside, that's how much space it is, right? So that's my observation of it, right? So here's a story. So I'm going to apply this story. So when my boyfriend Thomas and I went to, or life mate, I should say, we're way past boyfriend girlfriend thing, but we're life mates. So when we went to Montana a couple months ago, it was our very first trip together, road trip, vacation, all the things. And so, I had been talking for a long time. I'm like, I need a little tiny wine, coffee, juice glass that I can take around with me. And, we were looking around for one. And so, I kind of had my idea. This was about the shape and size and all the things that I wanted. So, so when we get there, I see this thing and I'm like, hey, it checks off the size, the space, it's cute, blah, blah, blah. Perfect, right? So that was my observation of it right then and there. Very basic. That was it. Okay, does that make sense, right? I think so. This was way a better explanation on the first video, but alas, here we are. All right, so we've got that observation, right? You can take a look at anything around in your house and you can observe, right? I see, you can do that. I'm not going to go into all that. You can do that on your own. All right, cool. So remember what was our second one? Analysis or analyze. There we go. Woo-hoo. Weird science. Cool. Look at this. All right, here we go. We have technical attributes. What does that mean? Viewer effect, cohesive elements, artist intent, and apply observations. Oh, Crystal, pray tell, what do all of those things mean? If I can find myself over here. This PowerPoint Zoom thing, I swear, one day I will understand it all. All right, so analyze, right? Technical attributes. Can I use it for the things that I wanted to, right? Yes. Can I use it to hold liquid? Absolutely. The viewer effect. This is the second part of my analysis. Do I like it? Yeah, I like it. It's kind of cool. It reminds me of Montana. It reminds me of going there with the life mate. It reminds me of a really great time, right? Okay, what's the next part of it? This, I'm telling you. All right. Cohesive elements. Yeah, does it work together? Yeah, it does. Could I see myself using this all the time and, taking it wherever I'm going? Yeah, I like it, right? So that's my analysis of it. What is the next part here? What is the artist's intent? Well, they made something for me to use, to take, to drink that I would like, right? All of those check the marks of what I was looking for. Yes. So my analysis of it when I was looking at it and we were looking at it at the store was all of those things. Does it do what I need it to do? Does it make me feel good? Yeah, perfect, right? So I applied my observations. It's the size I need. It's the shape. I can hold it. It's cool. I like the color, the silver. I like what's on it. Awesome. My analysis of it and the Life Mates analysis of it was, yes, it checks all of our boxes of something that we would like, right? And so we observed it. We analyzed it. Yeah. Awesome. Then we interpreted it. Interpreted it. Is that a word? I'm a hot mess. Do you guys remember that movie Stand and Deliver? Oh my gosh, that was one of my favorite movies as a kid, and it actually inspired me the first half of my professional career working with at-risk youth. So I had to definitely do a shout out to Stand and Deliver. So let's talk about the interpretation part of visual analysis, right? Form, symbols, ideas, meanings, subjective viewing. What does all that mean, Crystal? I don't know, because I can't figure out this PowerPoint. I can figure out art. I can figure out art, ancient Greek philosophy, but I cannot figure out Zoom. All right. So let's go back to my guy here, right? Interpretation. Okay. So we observed it. Yes, it served every purpose we need. We analyzed it. Yes, it is something that I could see myself enjoying and blah, blah, blah. Now let's interpret it. Now that our trip from Montana is over, now when I use it, it means something more. It has a symbol. It has a meaning. It reminds me of that amazing trip Thomas and I had that we shared together in Montana. All the memories, the laughs, the chats, the bonding, the things that we saw, the dreams and goals that we discussed on our way and, coming home, all of that, it is all encompassed in this cup. So if anyone else besides me and Thomas ever see this cup, no one's going to care. No one's going to really understand. They may be like, oh, cool, you went to Montana and you liked it. Yeah, sweet. But they're not going to understand what it means to me, how it affects me, how it defines me. Does that make sense? Right? And so you may get your own cup just like that, and it may symbolize and mean something completely different than what this means to me. You know what I mean? So that is where visual analysis gets applied, right? Because of those experiences that Thomas and I had. The place, the time, it was spring, it was late spring, all these different things, right? All of those things come into one feeling, one connection between me and the work. Does that make sense? I hope so. So kind of start trying to see that in everything that you see every day. Does that make sense? Okay, let's move on. All right, so that was our interpretation. So we talked about the form, right, which was already what the cup was. We talked about the symbols of it, the ideas that come from it, the meanings of subjective viewing. All right, now, this is the crux of the class. Now let us apply those skills to what we see in Layne's self-portrait. Yeah? Okay, let's go on. I keep forgetting to transition this PowerPoint so you don't see all three columns. So try to only pay attention to one column at a time, because otherwise you're going to miss out. I know that's how I work, so that's what I'm telling you. All right, so here we go. So observe. Let's talk about observations here. First thing we see, again, do not pay attention to analyze, interpret right now. We don't need that. Observe. This piece is abstract, right? It's abstract, which means it's not a photo. It's not an exact representation of somebody. It is somebody's view of something, right? So it's abstract, right? Just like think of Pablo Picasso, Salvador Dali, any of those types of artists, right? It's not exact, but it is close enough that we can identify it immediately as a human male, right? How do we know it's a human male? Well, You can see, first of all, there's some facial hair. You've got some sideburns. You have some chest hair, right? So you can see through that, and you've got the beard, and the mouth almost looks like, there's a mustache. I don't really see one. I really just see just the facial hair from the goatee down to the chin, or I'm sorry, the sideburns down to the chin. And then I see the chest hair. And then, of course, you see Layne Staley's signature at the bottom. And if you know this piece's background, you know that it is a human male. But if you're just the very first time audience to it, there's that. All right, the next part of him. It is a self-portrait, right? Now that we kind of know what the context is, it is a self-portrait of somebody, of Layne, right? And he made this aware by, first of all, the title of it, self-portrait. This was exhibited amongst other self-portraits that he created in his medium of choice, which is pen and ink. And it's a drawing, right? So I'm not sure the type of paper it's on. I'm not sure the pen he used. I do not know those technical aspects, although I wish I could ask him. But it is on paper and it was done in pen. So those are the mediums that we can observe, right? It is black and white, right? There are no colors there. It is just completely black and white. Let's look at that. And I say here it's a 3/4 profile view, but I am wrong. It looks to me, from the chest up would be a 1/4 profile view, right? So from here up, you don't see anything down. I think if it was 3/4, you would see up to the knee. So I have an error in that, which I will eventually fix. So you can see it's just from the chest up, right? So that's 3/4 or 1/4 view. Finally, when you observe this drawing, you immediately recognize the posture and the demeanor of the downcast head, right? It's obvious, it's evident, it's in your face, really. You cannot ignore it. It's right there for you to see. There's nothing else to distract you other than the downcast head of Layne in his self-portrait, right? All right, let's go to analyze. What does all of that mean? Okay, well, there's a color choice here, right? It's black and white, right? There are no other colors. That has to be significant, don't you think? That there are only 2 colors to demonstrate and showcase this self-portrait, right? I've seen several of Van Gogh's self-portraits, and there, Van Gogh is all about color. Layne chose to do black and white. This was his choice, his intent, right? I see this as a subtractive skill. Do you know what that means? We'll talk about it. Subtractive is like in sculpture, right? Michelangelo started with large blocks of marble. And as he chiseled away at the marble, he subtracted it, right? You take away, you chisel away, you subtract it until you get the form you want. When I see Layne's drawing, that reminds me of subtractive work too, right? It's like you start with a white piece of paper, canvas, whatever he used, and then you subtract that white out by adding the black, right? So I'll go into why I think that's significant later in my interpretation, if I don't forget. So it's subtractive to me. I'm not sure if my art historian professors would agree, but that's just how it is. It's aesthetically pleasing, right? You can look at it. It's beautiful. It may not be everybody's cup of tea. Hold on, while I drink my cup of coffee. It may not be everybody's cup of tea, but you can appreciate it. You can recognize it for its skill. You can appreciate it for its power, for its simplicity. The power with simplicity, through simplicity, it's a nice piece, I think. I'm a little biased though. At least I can admit my biases. And like I mentioned in the observation discussion, you can see what's happening. What did I just say here? The face, you can see what's happening with him immediately. You're not distracted by anything else. you immediately see the posture, the face, all of those things, right? You see all of that. You're not distracted by landscape, other colors. He wants you to see him, nothing else but him, right? So that's the artist's intent. When I analyze it, I see that he is saying, look at me, I'm struggling. Do you see yourself here too? Is this your mirror here too? Right? Layne had a very strong connection with his fans. By all accounts, Layne was an amazing guy. I wish I would have known him. But he had a very strong connection with his fans. When you watch videos of performances, he's squatting there, he's, engaging, he took his time out, always to talk to fans, to take photos, even if he wasn't feeling great, he did it. There are stories of him and his generosity to his fans. So you can see here that there is a connection of vulnerability that he is showcasing between himself and his fans, and he knows that they connect with him and that they are represented. I'm trying to deal with my hair. I don't know what's happening. They connect with him and he connects with them, and so it's almost like a way to bridge that gap between the two, right? It's a further connection because the audience and Layne were connected through lyric and music, but now he is connecting with them through visual art. See? Let's see what's next. It's realism, right? It's realistic. I don't know how many times I have caught myself in that exact same posture. Downcast, full of doubt, lonely, afraid, confused, so many times, as a Gen Xer, as a Gen Grunger, as a bipolar or Hispanic woman, I have felt alone, attacked, all of that to inspire that type of retreat into self, that struggle with the outside, all of it. And that's another reason why maybe the view is just from here, because you're trying to leave all of this other stuff and only focus on yourself. Not on what everybody else wants you to focus on, right? But what you need for yourself. And that was one of the very keys of the Gen X experience, is that now we can actually check out from our reality and go inward, reflect inward, and start to figure out what we need and how to heal our struggles, our doubts, our deprecation, so that we could be better people, right? This wasn't anything that, that was done in previous generations. You just kind of plowed through life in the conformities and in the labels that you were assigned to from birth or from socioeconomics or, just from culture. Gen X was like, we can do our own thing. We can get out of those labels. We do not have to be defined. But now how do we figure out how to not be defined by others and be defined by ourselves? Well, we need to reflect. We need to think, right? So that's what's showing here. So that's what's Layne's intent, I think. I mean, I'm never going to know. He's not going to tell me, but that's what I feel, is that there was that connection that he had to show. You're getting rid of all the outside influences and you're focusing on yourself, right? To heal yourself so that you could be better as a human being for yourself and for others, right? Individuality that was not safe is now becoming safe through our own action and reflection into ourselves, which was inspired by the music, by the lyric, by the performance, by the visual art of Layne Staley. All right, next. Now let us interpret black and white. Why would you do that? For me, it just shows all the duality, right? Duality. What is that? Everyone has a good side. Everyone has a bad side. I'm bipolar. So, I got both of them, right? I know when I struggle. I know when I'm here. I know when I'm there, right? Like we all have that conflict. Do I leave this job? Do I leave this relationship? Am I happy? That internal conflict is something that prior generations weren't really experiencing because again, you stayed in the same type of line of work. You know, you were whatever, a homemaker. These were the roles that you were assigned and you were stuck with. But now we have so much conflict of choice. Choice is hard, right? I mean, yes, it sucks to be stuck in conformity, but now that we have the freedom and autonomy as Gen X to be whatever we want, choice is hard, right? So we're conflicted, but we're navigating it. We're negotiating that. We're getting guidance from our singers, our heroes, who are showing us, yeah, it's okay to feel this way, and let's all get out of it together, right? So the emotions conveyed here, right? Sadness, grief, loneliness, despair, doubt, deprecation. You can see so many in that. You can see things that you can see things that I don't see, right? Because everyone's experience is going to be different when they're analyzing visually. But that's why we all do it, right? Because the more that we can open our minds and discuss these things, the more he, through his work, can continue to connect us through him. See, he's still there. He's still working for us. We love him. The symbols of it, right? Like the choice to not have a shirt on, right? And it shows vulnerability of heart, right? It shows fear. It shows like nakedness, vulnerability, like pureness too, right? Like, okay, I'm going to open, I'm going to release myself. And notice how he is the white, right? His body, his head is all the white, right? Like that's the light, that's the hope, through his conflict, through our conflict within us still remains that hope, that light, that goodness. Yeah. That's what that symbol of the white and black mean, right? The black is all everything else. But then you also see the darkened eyes, the darkened mouth, right? And that also symbolizes retreat into self, not opening up to everybody else, but retreating into self, showcasing your vulnerability, dealing with your accountability to yourself, to your own authenticity, right? So that's where you see that. That's where it's like, okay, I'm shutting my mouth, my eyes off to everything. I'm opening up my soul. I am releasing my issues. I am working through this, right? It connects to the audience, right? I feel that same way all the time. Well, not all the time, but like when I see that, I recognize those different times in my life where I feel that way, right? It doesn't mean the same thing to me every day, right? I listen to Layne, Mad Season, Alice in Chains all the time because every time I listen to it, it gives me something different. It's another perspective. It brings me back. It recalibrates me to whatever experience or time that I am enduring at that moment, right? So that audience connection is always there for me, just looking at it all the time. It reminds me of different things. It also reminds me that I can shine through despite the current doubt, despite the current turmoil. I can transcend through this, right? I can reflect my issues and I can get better, right? And that's what the purpose of the art is, right? I don't know what his intent was, but that is my interpretation, right? So I have given you my observation, my analysis, and my interpretation of Layne Staley's work. All of those feelings that he showcases in this, that is what Gen X, Gen Grunge was experiencing, the same thing. We were a little bit outcast, but we were really intelligent. We were very unique, but we were kind of put down. We were the slacker generation. So we were feeling all of these feelings like uncertainty. The media was saying we were slackers, that we were not anything like the baby boomers or greatest generation. Well, we weren't. Our situation, our circumstances were so completely different, right? So Layne's self-portrait represents how we were starting to mature and negotiate through all of these feelings that were playing onto us, but we knew were not true about us. We knew our light within, right? That's why there's white in that self-portrait. We knew what we had was good. And now we were trying to grieve through being hurt. And we were trying to bring back into that light, right? Fun. So anyway, so that is my reflection and interpretation of how Layne's self-portrait represents Generation Grunge. Quickly, this is another thing that I got from another website. The citation's on the bottom. But so like when we go through visual analysis, right, I remember I told you it's a whole thing. It doesn't just mean, oh, the colors are black and white and it's a dude in there and it's a drawing. No, it means everything. It represents everything that built up to it, right? Which was the first impression, how we felt about it, what we saw, the cultural context. That's the most important part here, is that represented how Gen Grunge was feeling, how they were trying to mature, right? He created that because he was a part of that maturation. He was a part of that, that transition, that battle cry to individuality, autonomy, nonconformity, right? So all of those things we were experiencing are represented in one work of art, right? The purpose, what does it mean? Again, it means to me, it means to me what it did then, right? I could manifest my own fears and doubts and work through them and transcend them. And I can still do that. And that's what that means. It also means to me that the rest of Gen Grunge could do the same thing, right? And then let's see. Okay, and then we went through the media. How is it made? The formal elements, just like the cup, right? Drawing, pen and ink, right? So all of those things, right, define. So next time you see a work of art, Rosie the Riveter, right? That defined the strength and the solidarity and the capability that women and the greatest generation had without men, right? And we still use that symbol today to represent a woman who can triumph without constrictions of men, right? That's what that means. Still to this day, 60 years later, that's what that means to us. Same thing with Layne's self-portrait. It means that maturation experienced by Generation X, by Generation Grunge. That's the purpose. And it includes all of those socio-political, cultural changes that we endured during that time of the late 80s and the late 90s, or until the mid 90s. I'm going to go to the mid 90s. All right, cool. So now, got it all? You see how it's all coming together now? Generations, Gen X, Layne, how art and visual analysis reference and reflect a particular time, a particular place, right? Now we'll talk about my thesis. Using the characteristics of Generation X's grunge movement, Layne Staley's self-portraiture represents the solitary journey of self-discovery through doubt and struggle, experienced by Generation X through its iconology and structuralist presentation. Members of Gen Grunge can identify its relevance in their own journeys while revering the artist whose journey ended prematurely. The tragedy of Layne Staley is memorialized in his self-portrait, which acts as a lifeline to his fans for its symbolism and semiotics. So basically, my argument is everything that I keep saying, right? Generations must be represented, reflected. They must include iconology, things that stimulate memory of that time, of that place, of that idea, of that sentiment. And that's what Self-Portrait by Layne Staley does. It represents those within Generation Grunge's subculture in the mid-1980s through the mid-1990s. It symbolizes our strength, our power, our ability, our individuality, our autonomy, our freedom, our independence that we fought for and that we had Layne and everybody else in Seattle Grunge to help guide us through. Anyway, that is the end of my lesson. I've got to pack it up. I got to go to work. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's not as great as the first one, but hopefully you saw the PowerPoint and everything. I'm going to do another one probably next week, to kind of finish out talking about other elements in the paper. And so I'll keep you guys posted. Everything updated is on my website. So I have been editing the self-portrait paper and adding on to the PowerPoint. So every time I add on to it with another lesson, I'll update that PowerPoint because I want it as one PowerPoint and not like a million of them. So you can see through that. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know in the comments. I would love to chat with you guys about this stuff. And thank you guys for listening and have a good day. Until later.